These days, it's pretty common to see our favorite heroes going back in time to change something from the past. Whether it's Avengers Endgame or the recently released The Flash, we've seen this kind of thing done over and over and over again. And while time travel in cinema certainly has its high points and low points, it's safe to say that one of the first movies to ever do it is still the best movie to ever do it. And that movie is Back to the Future.
What are you looking at, butthead?
Listen, say what you will about Robert Zemeckis and the movies he makes now, but back in 1985, Back to the Future was a movie that would change the course of pop culture forever. And in today's episode, we are going to be taking a look at the iconic clock tower scene from 1985's Back to the Future and figuring out why we love it so much. I think I probably say this about most of the movies that we break down on this show, but this truly is one of my all-time favorite films, and this scene specifically does so much for me. It's a scene that pretty much captures everything we love about the movie today. And if you've seen The Flash, then you know this is a movie that could have gone very differently if just one thing had been different. I'm Kier Gomes with JoBlo Originals, and you are watching Scene Breakdown. 1985's Back to the Future stars Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd, and of course was directed by the legendary filmmaker Robert Zemeckis. This movie is so special that it's been added to the United States Library of Congress for being culturally, aesthetically, and historically significant. It's also just one of those movies that if you've seen it, you love it. I think they even study this at USC Film School for the perfect screenplay as an example. And I must admit that if I was studying this screenplay, I myself would find it perfect. But this iconic movie as we know it today almost wasn't made. And seeing as the rights to the movie are still owned by Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale, and they are fully against any reboots, remakes, or sequels, this is the Back to the Future that we're left with and that we're stuck with. I consider that to be a win for us. Back to the Future is the story of Marty McFly. He's kind of a punk rock teenage kid in the 80s who travels back in time 30 years to see what his parents were like in high school. Of course, when the DeLorean time machine that he uses to go back breaks down, he is now stuck in the 50s and has to find the 1950s version of his best friend Doc Brown to help him get back to the future. I believe that this screenplay was pitched over 40 times before getting greenlit to get made. And as with a lot of the movies that we cover here, that makes it even more special. I mean, just be honest, have you seen this movie? And if you have, is there anything about it that you don't like? Not for me. Definitely not for me. Although I did hear that Michael J. Fox's kids haven't even seen this movie. This particular scene is getting near the end of the movie, and Marty has been stuck in the 50s for a couple of weeks already. The plan was for him to meet a high school version of his father, get him to fall in love with a high school version of his mother so that they meet, fall in love, and make Marty. The plan is to hook his parents up at the high school dance, and of course leading up to this there have been all kinds of strange and partially inappropriate complications, but Marty and Doc have one last chance to use the inclement weather to generate enough electricity from lightning to fire up the DeLorean and get Marty back to the 80s. By this point, the movie is very intense. It's been made clear that this is their one and only chance to get Marty back to his timeline. So much happens in the movie. I highly encourage you watch it if you've not seen it, but let's take a look at the scene. How 1980s is it to have Marty slide across the hood of the car like that? Come on, classic 80s move. I also love the lighting of this scene, always really have, just all the neon from the street, it looks so good. Everyone's favorite, Doc Brown. Already running into some complications. You know, I heard that Doc Brown was a culmination or kind of a concoction of Einstein and the composer, conductor Leopold Stokowski, and Christopher Lloyd made that creative decision to base the character on those two people. So you can kind of see it. I'll show some pictures. And the DeLorean. Did you know? I gotta pause it already. First pause. Did you know that the DeLorean was almost not the time machine vessel that they used? It was almost just like a regular like laser beam machine that was fixed inside of a room at Doc's house. And that's fine. I think if that had been what they went with, nobody would have really known what we were missing. But once you have the DeLorean, I mean, there's no substitute. That is the time. It's the quintessential time machine in movies, right? And it was almost not that. And John DeLorean, the DeLorean company was phasing out at the time. John DeLorean actually wrote Zemeckis and Bob Gale a letter thanking them for putting the DeLorean in this movie, which of course they selected because it looks futuristic, you know? And it kind of saved it. Kind of like how Risky Business saved Ray-Bans from going out of business. This movie saved DeLorean from going out of business. In fact, they still make them today, and they make them with a flux capacitor in them. So if you own a DeLorean, it's like you own the time machine. That is pretty awesome. Michael J. Fox is probably one of the most common Halloween costumes I've ever seen. It's minimal effort, but it's iconic. It stands out, you know? Let's do this, Marty.
I got all the time I want. I got a time machine. I can just go back early and warn him.
He's a really good actor. He was also filming Family Ties during this time. He was a reoccurring character on that show. And, he wanted to do this movie so bad after they cast him over Eric Stoltz that the director of Family Ties, the showrunner, let him film Family Ties during the day and then shoot Back to the Future at night. So that would explain why he has the exact same haircut, pretty much looks the same age. This is fun. Christopher Lloyd is so tall. If you had a different actor trying to do this, you would have had to block the scene differently. He's like 6'4" or something like that. It's really, you can really tell when he stands next to Marty, because Marty obviously is a little bit shorter. I think he's like 5'4" or something. Christopher Lloyd is like between 6'1". He's at least 6'1", between like 6'1" and 6'4". Oh, you gotta love that score too. Everything just works so well. And of course, if you guys didn't know, if you're a fan of Rick and Morty is obviously inspired by Back to the Future with Doc and Marty, Rick and Morty. Obviously, the characters look the same, the inappropriate relationship kind of the same. If anything, actually, the relationship between Rick and Morty is more appropriate because they're related, where these guys don't even know. This is just an old dude who hangs out with a high school kid. I still love it. I wouldn't change it. I couldn't. Iconic Nikes, too. What are those, Cortezes? Here we go. Got to get it up to 88. Christopher Lloyd, I know he's not always a comedic actor, but there's just, when I see him, it just puts a smile on my face. If you guys have ever seen Camp Nowhere, it's one of the best Christopher Lloyd movies, period. I cannot believe Michael J. Fox's kids haven't seen this movie. It's a real disappointment, man. Oh, we're getting there. Everything from just the lighting, the cinematography, it's all so intense and so dramatic. I feel like it's hard to make movies look this good now, even. I mean, obviously there's tons of movies that do it, but it seems like every blockbuster from the 80s had a look that is just you can't recreate it, you know, not fully anyway. Unless you're like Andy Muschietti with the It movies. Alright, I gotta pause it here. That clock tower is another super iconic thing from this movie, is the clock tower. And this was actually one of the first movies to be shot on Universal Studios' back lot. So there hadn't been movies made back here before, or at least not many. And the clock tower was constructed, and it's still there. I mean, you can still, if you go to Universal Studios, you can still see it. But it has survived 3 fires, this clock tower. There was a fire, I believe, in like 89 when they were filming Back to the Future 2 and 3. They filmed them simultaneously, and it almost took out the clock tower, but it survived. There was another one, I think a structure fire at Universal in 1994, which the clock tower also survived. And then most recently in 2008, there was another fire, and it took out the entire set of the old 1933 King Kong movie, which had been put there. But the clock tower itself is still standing. That's how iconic it is. You can't keep a good clock tower down. Quote me on that. Get way too excited. And to think all of this iconic stuff started from Bob Gale seeing a picture of his dad in the high school yearbook and wondering what it would be like to go back and meet him in high school. That's it. Let's go. Let's get those gigawatts. You know? Wow. And again, this movie almost didn't happen this way, you know? Like, the time machine almost was not a DeLorean. Marty McFly was almost not Michael J. Fox. It was almost Eric Stoltz, which, again, if you've seen the Flash movie, I don't want to spoil anything, but there is a joke about how the Back to the Future movies in the new timeline had Eric Stoltz instead of Michael J. Fox. I know it's a studio, but can you imagine if that was a real town? That town would be one of the most visited touristy towns in America, for sure. Rejected 40 times this movie. I can't believe it. It's so good. And now it's a perfect screenplay. A screenplay that didn't get picked up more than 40 times is considered a perfect screenplay. That just goes to show you everybody's different. People's tastes in movies are very different. Another interesting thing about this scene is that I believe Bob Yerkes, who was one of the stunt doubles for Doc Brown in this scene, he gets paid 3 times for this scene because they use that exact sequence in the first movie, in the second movie, and in the third movie. So Bob Yerkes only had to work on the scene the 1 time for the first movie, but because it popped up in the other 2 films, he got paid 3 times for just doing it the 1 time. And that's pretty awesome as well. So guys, that is the scene. I really, really adore this movie. I'm sure you guys too. So comment below, let me know what you think of Back to the Future. And of course, let me know what other iconic movie scenes you'd love to see me break down here on the channel. Thank you all for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.